Welcome. I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute. You're watching Devil's Advocate. So imagine what is hell for the Devil's Advocate, being stuck between two awful liberals in terrible causes. From Common Cause, Elena Nunez, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And from CoPIRG, Colorado Public Research,
Public Interest Research Group.
Hack liberal group. Danny Katz, thank you for being here. Now,
thank you.
I want to take this right off. We hate each other, all right? These you and me, we're on the opposite sides of, well, pretty much everything. Will we agree?
I think so.
Everything?
Most everything.
Most everything?
Yeah.
All right, so you're wrong, I'm right on pretty much everything except this one issue. And this is bizarre. I never thought I would team up with the likes of you people on any issue. So let's talk about putting things on the Colorado Constitution. Here in Colorado, we've got the petition and referendum ability. That is, we can put things on the ballot. Common Cause, over the years, has put several things on the ballot, which is now constitutional law. Give me kind of a backup.
So we've used the process many times throughout the years. Our open government, the Sunshine Laws, those were run through initiative. Motor voter in the 1980s was an initiative. And then most recently, campaign finance and ethics were both constitutional amendments as well. All right.
Now, how did you get them passed? And tell me about the petition.
Sure. Well, the way it works is you write your language and go through a process where it's reviewed by the legislature, a council that they set up. And the staff make sure that the language makes sense. Mostly for technical errors, they can't really tell you what to put in the Constitution or not. And then once that's approved, you go through a petition process to show that you have popular support for your issue. And you gather signatures. We had a combination of paid and volunteer. We're out for most of the summer at farmers markets, the People's Fair, gathering signatures anywhere we could, turned those in, and then once the Secretary of State found that we had enough, we were placed on the ballot.
And then often running on a campaign to get enough yes votes to change your Constitution.
And then the campaign starts.
Now, CoPIRG, being a good liberal organization, likes the initiative process as well, because you want to destroy the economy and do evil things and tell us how to live. You've also been involved, I mean, your organization has been involved in the petition process over the years as well, correct?
That's correct.
Do you remember any of these fights?
Yeah, one of them, the most recent one, was the working to create a mandate for renewable energy in the state.
Lovely. Yeah. Thanks for that. That was great. All right. So a lot of crap I hate. All right. Now that we've decided that, the ability to do these type of things is under assault here in Colorado in ways that people don't know. I mean, as a conservative, I love the initiative process because it gives us a safety valve over government. That there are things that the legislature will never enact themselves. Term limits, one of my favorites. No legislator would say, yeah, let's pass a law saying we have to be limited. TABOR, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which limits our spending. The legislature would never do that. I think you'd argue many of the things Common Cause has pushed for, they wouldn't.
Pretty much all of our issues. In fact, campaign finance, the reason we ran it constitutionally is that the voters passed it into statute, and then the legislature, at their first opportunity, chose to rewrite it so that it would be more palatable to them. So we do see that all the time.
Let me get some clarification.
Sure.
So you passed it before as a statutory change?
Right. In 1996, campaign finance was a statute, and then it went through the courts. There were some challenges. Parts of it were struck. The legislature, in an attempt to adapt to that, went much further and rewrote the law so it would be much less aggressive. So when we came back in 2002, we put it in the Constitution.
Right. And it's important to know the difference between statutes and the Constitution. The Constitution of the state of Colorado, much like the federal Constitution, is the big law of the land. It is the framework, and we've got a long one. And then the legislature is able to make laws on their own called statutes, and those they make on their own, but they can't change the Constitution without our say-so, right?
Only the people can change the Constitution.
Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing?
I think it's a good thing.
Why?
I think it's important. I mean, the Constitution is for the people, on behalf of the people, so the people should be the last voice in whether to actually be able to change it or not. We're an organization where we pride ourselves on standing up to powerful, mainly corporate interests, and if those interests are able to spend enough money to change the Constitution, then that undermines the people's ability to defend the public interest. And so that's definitely where we come from, and I think it's an important right for the people.
Frickin' communist. All right, getting back to this. Over the last couple of years, this petition process has really come under fire. And in fact, what has been a pretty friendly petition state has now turned into an ugly petition state. Now, there are a lot of purists who say, you know what, we shouldn't have this initiative process. It should only be those blessed few who make it to the legislature. They know what's best. Those of us outside, we don't know what's going on. We can't handle that. We have to let them do their thing. Why do you disagree with that? Why Why is it that we should have this safety valve over what they do?
Well, I think on a lot of the issues that we work on, the legislature never will take action. If we're talking about campaign finance reform or even process issues, I mean, the fact that meetings are open to the public, that's because the citizens of Colorado decided that it was important, not the legislature.
When did that pass, by the way?
Oh, that was the early 70s.
Yeah, I mean, all my life, I've known we've had open meeting laws, the Sunshine Law. I just took it for granted. But the legislature didn't make that happen.
Right.
The people made that happen.
Right.
I'll give you that one. I'll give you credit on that one.
Right.
All right.
Well, thanks.
Oh, come on. You weren't even born then.
That's true.
All
That's
right.
true. But yeah, no, throughout history, there have been issues where the legislature won't take action, and then the people need that safety valve so that they have an opportunity to raise issues and have them addressed. And certainly when you look at the influences at the Capitol, where money can dominate the discussion, where the entrenched interests really have a voice, if we don't have that initiative process, the people don't have a counterbalance to that influence. And so it's critically important that we have that.
And speaking from the more Tea Party aspect, we know that government's out of control. Here in Colorado, we've been able to rein in spending with Tabor. We wish we could do that in the federal level, but that's not going to happen because they're the ones who start off that process. There's also something called the referendum process, and that one's interesting in that any bill that's passed, we the citizens can say, no, don't pass that. We're revoking it. It's called the referendum, but there's a little catch. If they put in that safety clause, and the safety clause is a beautiful thing, last line of a bill, it says, this is being passed for the immediate safety of the citizens of Colorado. Then it can't go to the public.
Right.
And something like 95% of all bills now have this. So
the vast majority. This is the first year where I've actually seen a handful of bills that we work on that don't have a safety clause. And that's still the minority of bills that, are a subject for debate, but it's only a few. I mean, usually, no matter what it is, if it's, elections policy or campaign finance or anything else, no vote of the people, just as a matter of course.
Right. So don't change it.
Right.
And they're working. Now you need to trust government a little bit longer, a little bit more. These guys know what they're doing. And when there's breast cancer awareness week being declared, having that safety clause there is important because we wouldn't want the citizens to yank that back. Well, as a communist, you want to be able to yank some of these bills back because they're out of touch.
Absolutely, yeah. So again, we think that there are some very powerful interests working at the Capitol, and they have more power oftentimes than the people at the Capitol. I mean, that's why our groups exist, because we're groups that people want to actually be representing a certain set of interests. And so sometimes at the Capitol, you can't either get your issue through, or those powerful interests are ramming something through that isn't in the best interests of the public, and the public needs an opportunity to weigh in and say, hey, we have a good idea too, and it's not getting through the Capitol, but we want a tool to basically make sure that legislators are staying in step with where the people are at in Colorado.
Let's talk a little bit about petitioning. I'm convinced that those people say the Constitution in Colorado is too easy to amend are people who have never tried to run an initiative.
Right.
It is not an easy thing. You have to go through a lot of bureaucracy. You have to face a lot of legal hurdles. It's very expensive. I know, I've done it quite a few times. And then a couple of years ago, the legislature passed House Bill 1326, which has got me in a pickle. Even the Denver Post is saying that I'm now personally liable for actions that I've never even taken, and this is wrong. What did 1326 do, and why was it that turned out not to be so good?
Well, the goal of 1326 was to create more accountability in the petition process. And there was a sentiment that there was some evidence in support of, but there was a sentiment that it was too easy to put things on the ballot and that petitioners themselves were not always following the law. Like there was a videotape that was shown in a committee hearing of a 12-year-old girl gathering signatures. And there was this belief that people were coming in from out of state and gathering signatures and then leaving town, and there was no accountability. So the legislature wanted to crack down on this. Arguably, they went too far. Major portions of the bill have already been struck as unconstitutional. But then they've also created what I think is an unintended consequence, which is that if you don't like a measure, you can fight it at the ballot box, but then you can also go after the proponents and just keep them tied up in court for as long as possible so that they learn not to mess with you again.
That would be me, by the way.
Yes.
As a proponent of the anti-Obamacare initiative last year, because we hired petition gatherers who some of them used their home address from a different state rather than their resident address here, and there was no direction which one to use. That is now considered to be fraud under this law, and the proponents, the people who have put their names on the ballot, are now facing it. What's really ugly is there's a shall pay on this, which says if fraud has been found, the proponents shall pay the legal fees of those people who complained. So the well-funded lawyers who are doing this, I mean, potentially I could lose my house over this just because I wanted to petition the government. I mean, if now let me say this: only an idiot, only a man with a fiscal death wish would ever put their name on a petition because you're open to getting hit. I mean, are you under 1326? Will CoPIRG run an initiative?
It definitely has a chilling effect. I mean, we have to seriously consider whether we'll even be able to do that. You have to now put aside a lot more money than you'd ever have to put aside just to gather signatures for potential legal assaults that might have no merit at all other than just to attack you and to try and get you too scared to run something like this.
You have run, your organization has given us open meetings. It has given us the Sunshine Law, the ethics law on campaign finance. As it stands now, would you put your name as a citizen running a petition on a proposal to change the law?
I'd think long and hard before I did. I mean, I think the problem is that the bill as it's drafted goes not only against people who are bad actors, but people who are caught up in the fact that the law is ambiguous and subject to multiple interpretations, and that doesn't get you off the hook. You shall pay. So, yeah.
Right. And
we're certainly going to hesitate before.
And what's beautiful about still being on the hook and perhaps going into personal bankruptcy over this is, I don't know if you noticed this about Amendment 63, my initiative on Obamacare, but it lost. So
yet the battle goes on.
Yet the battle goes on from people who still want to drain me of resources and be a nuisance, and it's working. So at this point, I think the petition process is all but dead in Colorado if this law stands. I mean, unless you're able to get some homeless person who happens to be registered to vote to put his name on the ballot on the proposal, how are we going to do it? I think we're harmed.
Absolutely. Like I said, I think it has a big chilling effect. It's hard to imagine groups, especially groups like ours, grassroots groups, citizens who see a problem and they want to address it and they want to take a question to the people, being able to do that.
All right. But it doesn't stop there. The hits just keep on coming. So now that the petition process is dead, we need to kill it a little bit more with this proposal that will make it almost impossible to pass a constitutional amendment. It's called SCR1, Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 1. What does it do? Give me the brief.
So the goal of Senate Concurrent Resolution 1 is to keep the citizens from amending the Constitution. And they do it in a couple of ways. The first is to make it more difficult to gather signatures by saying that you have to gather them from every part of the state, which sounds nice, except that means it becomes more expensive to do. And then the real killer is that to put anything in the Constitution, you need a 60% supermajority vote of the people. So you can have a majority of the people who think that an idea is good, but if you don't have 60%, it doesn't go in. So imagine running a campaign against a well-funded interest. They can run a series of campaign ads, do some mailings, and even though you may still win, they can block the vote and keep it from going in the Constitution.
Here's what they're going to say. They're going to say that Colorado's amendment is Constitution is too easy to amend. That we have these conflicting laws that have been put in there, Tabor and Amendment 23, and they bash, and then we got the Gallagher Amendment, and so it's too easy. Some people say it reads like an address book. You can just keep putting things into the Constitution. Is it too easy to amend the Constitution here?
I don't think so at all, and I think that those sort of statements seem to indicate an elitism, a sense that somehow the people don't know what they're voting on or shouldn't be allowed to actually have a say in how their state is run or how their Constitution what should be in the Constitution. And it's particularly galling because it seems like the whole intent is to try and keep the citizens down, to keep this power away from them.
What's kind of interesting is that the state constitution, Article 5, says that we, the people, are actually the General Assembly. So there's the General Assembly we elect, but also we are considered the General Assembly through the referendum, through the initiative process, through this ability. But in order for them to pass something, they need 50%. But in order for us to pass something, we're going to need 60% now. And if this law was in effect before, Amendment 23 would not have passed. So the education community wouldn't like it. I would like that, but they wouldn't. Tabor would not have passed. You freaks would have liked that. And term limits would not have passed either. But your socialistic proposals, you got a few.
We still have campaign finance
somebody
and
else.
ethics and a few other things. Yeah.
Really? So here's the scary thing for conservatives. If this resolution passes, Common Cause will be the only group that will get things passed. Do you really want that? So, but this is steam. This thing is coming out of the legislature. I don't think there's any way to stop it.
No, there's a lot of support under the Gold Dome because they think the people over the years have made a series of bad decisions. They don't always agree on what those bad decisions were, but they agree that we all have done things they don't like. And so they've decided we shouldn't be allowed to tinker with it anymore. Now, the thing that I think is interesting about this proposal is, one, it requires 60% for future measures to go in the Constitution, but they only need 50%. And it grandfathers things that are already in there. So if they want to undo anything we've already done, they only need 50%. But their measure needs 60% if we want to undo this attack on the petition process.
So let me see if I get this. Yeah. They can refer something to the ballot. They only need 50% of.
Well, they need
amendments.
2/3 of the vote in each house, but yes.
They can put anything in the ballot, and they don't have to pay anything.
No.
They don't have to get any
no signatures,
volunteers.
no.
They don't need to put themselves up for personal bankruptcy. And this is the other part. They get immunity now, thanks to 1326. If you put something up and petition your government, you could be sued individually now. They can try to put something on the ballot. Right. They've got immunity. Doesn't seem fair, guys. Next part is that if we'll have to get 60% of the vote to pass any constitutional amendment.
Right.
But to repeal things that have already been passed,
like Tabor, perhaps?
You only need 50%. Right. What's the thinking behind this? Any thoughts?
Again, I think that it certainly you could read into it and think that there's certain things that have already been passed that they want the potential to go back and repeal, and that anything that they want to pass in the future they don't want to have repealed. And so you've got to be thinking Tabor's one of them, since that's one of the biggest things that's been passed in previous years.
So in other words, we can repeal Tabor or Amendment 23 with only a simple majority of the popular vote, but if we ever wanted to put it back, it would take 60%. It's a way to make sure Tabor stays away forever. Right. Or many of these other proposals.
Right. Mm-hmm. Any of you. Except for the one, Senate Concurrent Resolution 1, if it were to go in the Constitution. Even though it will be passed before 2013, which is the way the law is written, it's the one piece of legislation in the Constitution that could be repealed only with 60%. So we're going to make it harder to amend the Constitution, but if you want to change that, it's going to be harder to take that out.
That's perverse. Yeah. That is just, it's
Diabolical.
diabolical.
Isn't it? Yeah.
And it really is. So let me see if I get this. We're going to, with a simple majority, require a supermajority. So they can get 51%, right. And then after. But if we want to remove that law that requires them a supermajority, we have to get a supermajority. Yep. So it only puts. Talk to me a bit more about the ethics of this. That both Republicans and Democrats love this when they're in office. I mean, they might not like your campaign finance reform laws. I don't like them. They certainly don't like open meetings. They certainly don't like term limits. They certainly don't like Tabor. Nobody likes this. A lot of Republicans say, well, we don't want those acorn guys doing it. But here we are, diametrically opposed groups. The Independence Institute, CoPIRG, Common Cause. We don't have a lot of mutual friends. We're opposed to it, but so many Republicans and Democrats are supporting this. I mean, the list of co-sponsors.
Staggering.
It's staggering, this thing, the fly. Why is it that Democrats and Republicans join hands on this?
Well, I think a lot of it is Democrats and Republicans who are in the legislature. So when you're in the legislature, I think your view is, I'm here, I have the power to pass bills, and I have the power to kill legislation that I don't like. But if it leaves this building, I don't have any more power. And so I think they genuinely believe that they should be the ones deciding the future of Colorado. And so that laundry list of legislators and also all the people who sponsor it are people who tend to be powerful in the Capitol, and the folks who are out, the grassroots folks who are outside of the Capitol are the ones who realize the danger of something like this to the future of Colorado.
Talk to me about the coalition that's putting this together. There are also a lot of interest groups that seem to like this. A lot of groups that came out. I think the AARP came out and said, "No, this is good. We need to make it harder." Right. What brings this coalition together?
Well, there's an organization that came together a few years ago called Colorado's Future, and it was formed after the DU panel studied the initiative process and decided it was too easy, that there needed to be changes. And it's funded primarily, we think, by large business groups. They've got statewide interest. They've spent a lot of money doing grass tops organizing and going out
Grass tops organizing? What is that?
finding the leaders in a community, bringing them together and saying, help us come up with a solution. They've guided them to a solution which looks a lot like Senate Concurrent Resolution 1. And part of their rap is that the legislature is not always a good place to make policy because it's political. But the people aren't always a good place to make policy because we're irrational and kind of hot-headed and easily distracted. So they've pulled together this, kind of top VIPs of society to decide what good policy is, and they're now moving it forward. But yeah, it's got broad support from, everything from the business community to the Farm Bureau to the AARP, groups that think that the Capitol is a better place to make policy.
Well, that's because they have more influence.
Right.
It's a whole lot easier to count the votes and influence 100 legislators than it is to influence 5 million Coloradans.
Right.
So you do the math. Of course, business interests don't want this petition process.
And frankly, they have enough money so that even if they ever wanted to go to the initiative process, they have the money to be able to pass whatever larger hurdles they've now put in place too. So I think that's part of their calculation.
The Denver Chamber of Commerce really has been pushing this. And the Denver Chamber of Commerce, not been a friend of the petition process, but they're the ones who fought those Doug Bruce, were they Doug Bruce? We don't know if they were Doug Bruce, amendments that were on the ballot last fall. 60, 61, 101, I think those were. Mm-hmm. And they spent $7 million destroying these amendments. So they got on the ballot, they spent $7 million, and a couple of them got 25% votes. I mean, it was just embarrassingly wild. And they're saying, well, we got to stop this because we're spending too much money. My take is the Denver Chamber of Commerce used a howitzer to kill a fruit fly, and now we're all going to lose the petition process. They could have spent a Sunday passing out some flyers, and those things would have passed or it would have failed.
Right.
So what do you say to the business community?
Well, I think, and this is certainly true of all of us, we may not agree on all of the issues that go on the ballot, but ultimately it's up to the people to decide. We should have a process that's fair and transparent and accountable. But beyond that, just because you don't like a particular measure, that's not a reason to not have the process. There are a lot of bills at the legislature that I don't like, but I've never run an initiative to get rid of the General Assembly. I've thought about it.
I think maybe we ought to do that.
Yeah.
I think that the Tea Party folks, when they understand what's going on here, I mean, the Tea Party folks, my guys, we want to restrict government in Washington, and a lot of the people we've now elected into the state legislature, thanks to it's the Tea Party push this year that I think helped the Republicans get majority in the House. I think a lot of Republicans are going to answer to some pretty angry constituents when they find out these constituents have been disempowered.
I absolutely agree, and in fact we've been talking with those very constituencies and trying to coordinate in an effort to kill this effort to undermine the ability of the citizens to make these sort of changes. So I know that they're out there, they're watching, and if I was a Republican legislator, I'd be very concerned about what they think, and they're definitely watching. So.
We've only got a few minutes left. There was yet one more hit on the petition gatherers this year. Was it 1072? Another bill that comes out that goes after petition gatherers. Help me remember, what are the details in this one?
Well, again, that's a bill that I think was addressed primarily at Doug Bruce, and the idea that we didn't know who paid for the signatures for 60, 61, and 101. And I think it's perfectly legitimate to say if you're a proponent, you should know who's gathering signatures on your behalf. But the bill as written goes much further than that. And I think it's still an open question as to whether or not the legislature will be willing to learn from their experience in 1326. And that was something that came up a lot in the committee hearing. You by name, they'd say, oh, well, what we did to Jon Caldara, that was wrong. We need to revisit this issue. We need to figure it out. But then the bill moved forward pretty much unamended.
It was a unanimous vote that took 1072 far. This was the we don't want Doug Bruce doing this ever again.
Right, not secretly. We want to know where the money's coming from, which, certainly common cause. We think it's important to have, transparency about who's paying for these measures. But we already have laws in place to make sure that happens. And really, we need to enforce the laws we have, not just keep creating more barriers.
What does 1072 do? How does it force somebody like Doug Bruce to become transparent?
Well, the theory is, and this is where I think it falls apart, but the theory is that if you're named as the proponent, you have responsibility for the signatures that are gathered. So you can't say, like what happened last fall, that even though you submitted the language, you don't know who got the signatures. So if you had a Doug Bruce or someone else paying for those signatures, you would ultimately be responsible for reporting that money. And the law requires that linkage. Now, in practice, it usually happens that way anyway, but it didn't last fall. So this law just says the proponents must file where the money for the signatures came from and who got those signatures.
That doesn't sound so bad. What's the chilling aspect of that?
Well, again, the personal liability issue that was in 1326 comes up again. And as drafted, it also says that if there's any error on your report, you have to pay a penalty of 3 times the cost of that error, whether or not it was a knowing error. Which, given that all of these laws are being challenged right now and there's a lot of confusion about what's actually required and what's not, you could have someone completely well-intentioned file a report, make a mistake, not know they made the mistake, and then be on the hook to pay for the difference in fees.
You would be an idiot to put your name on an initiative today. I mean, I don't know who would be stupid enough. You'd either have to be very wealthy so that when all the nuisance lawsuits come, you can pay out the $1 million, or have no net worth at all, and you say, I'm broke. Go ahead and take my clothes. Where's this all going to go? Give me some predictions. What's going to happen with this, the legislation? More importantly, what's going to happen with this amendment to get rid of amendments?
Well, we're fighting it pretty heavily, and we're building a very broad coalition with the Tea Party, with other groups that are out there. So there's definitely a lot of grassroots groups that care a lot about this, and we're fighting it pretty hard. The odds are pretty good, though, that it will pass, and then it'll go to the people. And I think the people will see through it. I think we're going to be doing outreach to make sure that they see that this is a grab at their ability to offer up good policies to the state of Colorado.
You tend to agree with that?
I do.
You think it'll pass out of the legislature, and you think we'll be able to kill it this fall?
Well, I think it'll be interesting to see, because I think that the people who want to see this move forward are hoping that someone will chip in $6 or $7 million like they did against 60, 61, and 101 and do that so that we can pass SCR 1. I don't know that that's necessarily going to happen, but it should make for an interesting debate.
The end of it. How bad is it being with me on the same side of an issue? Bad?
Watch out, world.
Watch out, world. It's ugly. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, and thank you. Listen for me late nights on 850 KOA. Tell a friend about the Independence Institute. That's independenceinstitute.org, and we'll see you next week.